The last class, we were seeing from how do we build an image from a Docker file, correct? So now in that Docker file, there are a lot of instructions that we have to keep. So one of them that we saw was the first, how do you specify the image, that is the from that we give, and after that we saw run. Okay, so let us try to understand each of the instructions or the commands that we give inside the Docker file and what is it used for. So okay, so if you remember, this is what we give, right? So wherein from is the statement which specifies what is the image that you want to take. Okay, and after that we gave run, and there are a couple of others, something similar to run. So what exactly is run? So actually, run is the command which specifies the Docker where the container should run. I mean, what exactly you should do. So whatever commands that you give, those commands are the ones which will be run inside the container when you try to create a container. Okay, so as when you keep start running the container, whatever commands that you give, that will be running, because that is what we saw in last example. Now along with that, we have another option called CMD, which stands for command. So what's the difference between CMD and command? Pretty much both are same, but the difference is that the CMD specifies the whatever option or command that you're giving to do to run as soon as when you create a new container. Okay, now this is what even we did using run, right? So you specified some command, like yesterday we specified one command called echo dummy and whatever that we keep. It's the same thing what CMD is going to do, but the difference is if you are passing any values, okay, it will be overwriting with whatever that you have already have. That means by default, whenever you invoke a container, we used to give a command called bin bash. You remember that is nothing but the CMD. So if you try to pass some value, then that will be overwriting whatever the value that you have inside your Docker file. So it's not that every time it will be the same. You can pass some values and you can overwrite it. So almost you can think CMD and run are both the same, but the difference is if you specify a value to CMD, then it will be overwritten within the value what you have specified in the Docker file. That means now if I have given a value, okay, now if I want to pass some value during runtime, we can do it, but for run you cannot replace it, but for CMD you can replace it. So that is the only difference what you have. So if you have a requirement wherein you have given some command, but say suppose during the runtime when you are building the image you want to change some value of this, then it is not possible using run. But if the same thing you have given a CMD, then it is possible. So how do you work on that? So it's the same way wherein you will say CMD followed by the list of commands that you want to keep. Suppose if you have multiple commands or a single command with many parameters, then the syntax of whatever that you're going to use will be using the space separated or comma separated is what you will give. So let me just quickly show you the same thing. Let's have one more session. Okay, so here I'll say CMD and I'll do the same command echo, and in that we will say what is the next option that you want to pass to it. So I just want to print something. So now, okay, the first thing is we don't have the Docker running. So let's start the Docker. Okay, so we have these many images. Let me go to that folder. Okay, now this is where we have the Docker file. Here, now let us say Docker build -t, and you will say what? The name of the image. Okay, so I'll say test image 01, and let's say dot. So if you see, it will run this command along with it. Okay, so pretty much CMD is going to be the same, but how do you pass a parameter? That I'll show it in some time. But there's not much difference between CMD and run. If you want to pass a parameter during runtime, you can use it. If not, use the run. Now, just similar to this, we have one more command called entry point. But again, what's the difference once again using run and entry point? But the difference between run and entry point is that even you can run a command using entry point. But if you have any arguments, right, then you can pass it in the same way during run. So pretty much we don't use it much of the times, but other than that, both are one and the same. So you can just skip it. So let's go to the important ones. Now we have one more command called workdir, or the directory which specifies from where you want to work. So whenever you are creating a container, if you want to go to a specific directory and then do some task, then you specify the workdir. Okay, so now what workdir will do is when you are running inside the container, it will go to the specific directory that you are given and create or do whatever task that you want to do. So for instance, now let's take this. Say for example, I am running a command. Okay, and say this command is just creating a file. Okay, now let me say that I'll say touch. I'm creating a file called I'm here. Okay, now if you see where exactly this file will be created. Suppose if I run this command here. Now, where does it get created? It gets created on whatever directory that you are running. So currently, if you see, I am running this command in this directory, that is user docker, and that is where the file is created. The same thing, okay, the same thing if I go to a different folder like temp, okay, so inside this, if I run the command, what will happen? It will get created. So wherever you run the command, you are creating a dummy file called I'm here, right? In the same way, now what happens is when you are creating a container and when you're running this, where does it run? It will always be running from the root directory because by default, the home directory of the root is slash. As I said, if you remember, every user has a home directory, correct? So the home directory for our user, that is root, is the slash. So that is where from it will be running. So quickly, if you see now, okay, now let me try to do a build and create the same image again with the new file. Oh, okay, I'm inside. Okay, so now we have a new image, right? So let's quickly do a Docker run. Okay, and so August 2301. Okay, container, and okay, so here we'll use this. Okay, so what I'm doing, I'm just quickly creating a container with this image, whatever we have created, right? So now, if you see, what is the default directory? That is root. So when you created this image, and for creating this image, it would have created a container. In that, first it would have put the Ubuntu image. After that, it would have run this command, right? So if you note from where did it run, it ran the command from the root directory itself, because whenever it goes inside a container, whatever directory it is, from that directory it is running. So this is what is happening. But now say you want to run this command from a specific directory. Okay, so then we will be using this work dir. Okay, so now how do I do that? So now just before this, here, if you just say work dir and the path, okay, so now if I say work dir and I can give some path, so let me say this as temp. Okay, so I'm telling it, go to the slash temp folder, and then whatever you want to do after this, you do it. So that is what it means. That means you are changing the directory from whatever home directory that you're present to this directory, and all the commands and whatever that you're giving after this will be run from this directory. Okay, so okay, now let me create the image once again. So now if you see, first it goes to the work dir in that temp, and from that temp it will be running this command. So here, let us create an image. Okay, so okay, now let me create one more container from this. Okay, so now this time if you see, this is the file which is already present. So if you see this, it is going to the temp folder, and inside the temp folder it is getting created with the file. Getting it? So it is not just creating the file, but it is going to the temp folder, and from this temp folder it is creating. So that is how, if you have any requirement of doing some task from a particular directory, then you can specify it using workdir. So this is the way that you can do. But suppose if you want to pass this value anywhere during the runtime, then you can use -w option during your run to change that value. Okay, so this way you can overwrite whatever value that you have given. That means now if I create the image, it will always go to the temp folder and it will be running, right? Suppose I don't want to go to the temp folder. I want to go to some other folder, but that is only for your container. How will you change? Now it is not possible again to go and change. So in that case, whenever you are creating the container, so when you are creating the container here, you can simply give a option of -w, and you can give some other directory. Okay, so that rather than going to the temp folder, whatever value that you give, suppose if I say user bin, it will go to this folder and then do whatever tasks that it has done. So pretty much you can use it during runtime here, or you can specify it inside the Docker file. Okay, okay, now the next thing. So when you are creating a container or an image, pretty much it is nothing but an operating system that you're going to use. Now, there would be requirement where you need to set certain environment variables. Now, what is an environment variables? Environment variables are nothing but a set of values that you can store and you can reuse it for the working purpose. So if you look at, every machine will have a set of environment variables that is nothing but the environment using which you will be doing some values. Say for example, if I run the command env, you'll be getting so many details. So here, if you see, it tells you what is the name of the host, which has been stored into some variable, who's the user who's doing it, and then what is your current working path, what kind of editor you want to use. Like that, many specific details that you want will be stored into a variable. And now these variables can be reused. So these things are called as environment variables. Now, pretty much you can create your own environment variable based on your need. Yes, someone had a question. Hello. Did anyone had a question? Okay. So if you guys have a requirement to create an environment variable of your own, or if you want to change the default environment variable which is available, then you have to use this env. Now, pretty much, for example, let me create a simple variable. Okay, say I want to create a variable called name, and I want to set the value as Adam. Okay, now here, can you see that somewhere? Hmm, that's very minute. Anyways, okay, so you can set it up like this. Now, by default, there are environment variables like path, which is used for running all the commands that you have. So whenever you run some command, how does the system know it? Say, for example, if I run ls, how does it know that ls is a command? If I say echo, how does it know that it is a command? So all these things are being possible by a environment variable called path. Okay, so this is nothing but a variable which is set in your environment. So every time you log into this machine, this variable will be set. And for this, if you see, there is a list of values where these values are nothing but directories within which all the commands that you enter would be there. So if you are installing some new software and you want the system to recognize that, then in this variable called path, you need to add the directory of where your library or your binary that you want to run should be present, so that when you give some command, what will happen is the system will go to this list and it will check whether the commands whatever you are entering is available in any of these directories. And in case if it is available in any of these directories, then it will run. Suppose you are giving some command and that is not available in any of these directories, then it will say that there is no such command. So like that, you might have to work on a default environment variable of the machines, or you might have to create your own environment variable. So in that case, if you want to create an environment variable for your purpose, then you have to use this command called env, wherein you will say env and the name of the environment variable, and then what is the value that you want to set. So now when you use this, what will happen? So if I say env, let me say the same thing. I'll say my name. Okay, and I'll say this. So this is the value that I'm trying to set. Okay, so let's create a container. Before that, let's build this image as a new image. Okay, okay, let's create a new container. Okay, so you have this file, and then let's see if the environment variable has been set. You see, it has been set. So many times, as I said, when you're creating some application or running some step, you might have to set some environment variable specifically, because inside the container it is like a operating system, so you want many commands to be recognized. So you might have to change your path variable, or if you're installing some software, then specific to that you need to change any environment variable. Then you will be creating an environment variable using this env. Getting it? Any questions so far?
Adam, like, can you just wrap the things like command and entry point once more? Just a brief view. Little confusing it is. I understood, but once I am trying to remember and I forgot everything.
Okay, so now you don't have to worry about entry point, you can just ignore it. So all this does the same purpose or serves the same purpose. That is, if you give any command that you want to run, you can run it using run or cmd. Okay, but just assume the difference as this way. Suppose if you're passing some value to the run and you want to change it during runtime, it is not possible for you to change. But if you have given the same command using cmd, then you can change this value. You're
Okay.
getting it?
Yeah.
So that is the only difference. Now here, run means whatever that you have given inside it, it will be running. That's it. You cannot change that value during runtime. The only possible way of changing is you have to open the Docker file and you have to manually edit and change. But if you give the same thing using CMD, then it is quite possible for you to change it during runtime. Getting
Okay.
it? So that's the major
Yeah.
difference. So if you have a requirement to do during the runtime, if you feel that you want to change, then you use CMD. And suppose you don't want to do it, then you don't have to specify in CMD. It will always be using run.
Okay. So this entry point.
Entry point is again similar, but the slight difference is after you log into the machine, what is the first command that you want to run? So that is what the entry point will specify. So if you remember when we creating the container, I said run slash bin bash, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you remember, I was saying the same word called entry point. So what is the first thing that you want to run when you create a container?
Okay.
So that is what is entry point. So when we created the container manually, here, what is this I'm giving here? So I'm giving two options. The first option is the image name from which I want to create the container. And what is the next one?
It is the space like where the commands get executed. Like we are giving an environment
Exactly.
for the
But
command to get
if you
executed.
see internally, even this is a command, right? You are
Yeah.
creating an environment. That's absolutely correct. But if you see from an operating system, even this is the first command that you're executing. So the entry point of the container is nothing but this.
Okay.
Okay. Suppose if you want to change this, and that is when you are going to use this entry point.
Okay.
Getting it?
Yeah. Yeah. Got it. Thank you.
So now, when you're creating environment variables is what I showed. Now, just like that, we have one more command called user. So what is user? Now you have to think completely from an operating system, like whatever that you want to do, what different cases you might have to do. That is why we are using Dockerfile. Now, say every time if you have noted, if you go inside a container, it is always working everything as root because I am running this command as root, so it uses the same user and it creates the container and it is running everything. Correct? So if you have a requirement where you specify that you should be running the image as a different user, then what is the user that you want the image to be run? Okay, so that is what the user will be defined. Now here, let me check what are the default users available. So etc password is the file where all the user account details will be stored. So if you see, you have so many default account that has been present in this machine. So now, say for example, you want to run as nobody. Okay, now how do you do that? So if you want it to run as nobody, that is when you are building this image and you want all these commands to be running specifically as the user called nobody or any other user, you can specify that. Since in my container right now, which is a empty container, so we don't have all these users. So what I'm doing is I'm just using a default user called nobody. So now here, if you specify user and the name of the user or the user ID, okay. So once you do this, what will happen? So after this, when you are creating the container, what it will do? First thing is to build this image, it has to create a container. Now for creating a container, it will be practically first using the image and then whatever user that we have specified, that is nobody, it will be running as them. Okay, so I'm back to my image. Let me create a new image. Okay, so if you note, it runs everything step by step and it would have created this image. But pretty much, if you see all those things, whatever that you have created will be as the user called nobody. So let me create a new container. So what happens? What is the user that you're working as? You're working as nobody because until now, whenever you created the container, it was always created as the same user as whom you are running the Docker command. But when you specify the user, okay, whatever that you want to run will be changed into the user called nobody. So it is like switching user from one to another. Suppose if you don't want this at any point of time, you can again use the su command and specify the user ID of whom you want to use. Okay, so that you will be going back. Anyways, root access is not there. But rather than working on the same ID, you can change it. So that's the difference why you use Nobody, because there are certain containers where you want to run with some special account which has all the permissions. Then you have to specify that. If not, what will happen? If you run Docker, it will always create the container and run whatever that you want to do in the same user account from where you are running the Docker command. So to change it, we will be using this user command to specify as which user you want to run. Getting it?
Yeah, done.
Any questions?
No, as of now.
Tapasya, any questions?
Adam, we are creating a new variable and assigning the value to it, right? How can we append a value to the existing variable?
So if you want to append a value to the existing one, then say for example, I created this, right? So if you want to append, then you have to do the same thing. Name, dollar name. So if you say dollar and a environment or a variable, then it will be giving back the value stored in it. So now here I can add some specific value. Suppose say I want the name to be like this. So this is how I want the name. So I can once again create it like this and fresh. If not, if I want to add, simply I can say name, okay, and equal to, I'll say dollar name. So when I say dollar name, what will happen? Whatever value that is already here will be coming, okay, and then I will just append it, okay.
So we can do the same thing in the uh, Docker file, right?
Yeah, you can do it.
Yeah.
So if a variable is already existing, then you can just overwrite that and you can get it.
So, because if you wanna give this Java path to the existing variable, then we need to append, right? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, you can do it. So if you're
Yeah.
having a new one, right? If it is already available, then all you have to say Java home, and here you need to get the value, right? So you just say Java home and then followed by whatever value. Suppose if you want, and usually you will not be appending values to Java home. Only for the path variable you will be appending. But if you want to append
We,
anything along with it, then you just continue from here. Append the value
yeah,
here.
that's yeah. Yeah, usually append the values to the variable, right? That's what
Yeah, so
I'm
that you will be
concept.
doing only for path. Only for the path you will be
Okay.
doing. Suppose if you are specifying, then you will give like this. So you will say
Mm-hmm.
the new path. This is how you will be saying.
Okay. Mhm.
So
Okay.
whatever
Okay.
is the
I got it.
existing path, it will be taking on top of it.
Okay. So we can do the same thing in Docker file as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Now, these are the couple of the things that we saw, right? Now, before going into this, we have a couple of other things to do. Now, let me go through this today. So, say you are running a container and you're building an image from it. So, suppose if you have a requirement where you want to you want to copy some files and you want to create the image. So, in that case, you will use the command called copy. So, what copy will do is this will be adding whatever files or the directories that you are specifying from your machine, host machine, to your image. You're getting it. Suppose you are creating an image, right? Using this container, you are creating this image. Now, say while creating, you want to copy some file from your machine. That is, right now, if you see, this is my host machine. From this machine, if I want to copy this file or directory inside this container or the image, then you will use the copy. So in that case, let me just quickly show you an example. So right now you have this one, right? So what we'll do is, let me create a file called, I'll say copy. Okay, I'll say testing copy. Okay, so this is the file, and let me write something. Hey, this is a file present in my host. Okay, so right now I just have one more file called testing copy in my Docker folder. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify the same thing here. Okay, let me just remove all those things just to make it simple. Okay, so here, what does that have to do? I will say copy, and what is the source from where you want to copy? So if you remember, whenever we were creating the image, I used to say dot. That means the Docker file is present in the same folder. Now, this file is also present in the same folder. So I will simply say testing copy. Suppose if this file is in some other location, then you have to give the complete path from where it is present. Okay. And now, once you have specified, where do you want to copy this into the container? Suppose if there is a specific directory inside the container that you want to copy, then what is that copy path is what you need to say, wherein this is the source and the next one is the destination. Okay, so you can specify where exactly that you want to copy. Now let me say it as temp itself. So on the new container, when you're trying to create the image, in that it will copy this file from your source machine or the host to this folder called temp. Okay, so now let's create an image. Okay, I'm creating a new image. All right, so let's now use this image and create a new container and run it. Okay, so we are inside the container. Now let's go to the temp folder, and in the temp folder, if you see, you will be having this file. So that is how, if you have a requirement to copy a file from your source or the host machine inside the container or the image, then you can use copy. Okay, now just like copy, you have one more command called add, where you can use this also to copy the file from your host to the Docker container. But the difference with add is, if you have any tar file or any zip file, that is generally an archive file, then add will extract the content along with the copying it. So unlike copy, copy is just going to copy. Okay, but suppose say that instead of copying this file called testing copy, suppose if I had a tar file or a zip file, that is an archive, then if you want to extract it, not just copy, right? So if you want to extract, what will you do? First you want to copy this using copy command, then you will use a run command to extract them inside it, right? So instead of doing these two steps, you can use add, where what add will do is, if you specify a tar file or archive file, it will copy and directly extract it. So rather than doing it in two steps, directly it will extract the content of this archive file into whatever folder you are seeing. Okay, so that is the difference. So whenever you have some archive file and you don't just want to copy but you want to extract, then simply use add. So if not, if there is only copying of files or folders, then you use the copy. Copy is nothing but similar to what cp command that we use in our operating system to copy one thing. But the difference here is the source is your host machine, whereas destination is your containers directory. Getting it?
Yeah, then
Okay. Now, moving on to the next one. So there's a command called onBuild. So what is onBuild? So onBuild is something like a trigger that you can set, and this will get executed when you create another image from your existing image. So right now, whatever commands that I was giving in the Docker file, it used to get executed whenever you are creating the image, right? But say if you have a requirement which has to be done only if someone else is creating a container, or if someone is creating an image from your image, not just a container. Say that now I have created an image called test04 based on the content in the Docker file. But if you have created an image, and from this image, if you are trying to create another image, and then if you want to run some commands, that is when onBuild will do. Okay, so onBuild is nothing but the set of instructions that will be executed when another image is built from the image that you are trying to do a build using the Docker file. Getting it? Now, let me show that. Okay, so now here we had a copy, right? So let me just, so you'll say on build, and whatever that you want to run, you will specify. So now let me say on build, and on the on build, I am saying a run command. That means now whenever someone is trying to build this image, then you run this command. So what does that have to do is I will say echo some specific thing. Okay, I'll say copy of a image. Okay, I don't want to do all those things. Let me say just test. And I want this to be present inside. Okay. So what I'm doing is I am trying to give a command called run, and that is going to do what? It is going to simply run a command called echo test, which is nothing but it is going to put the content called test inside this file. Okay. So see this. If I just, so what it is going to do, simply create a file with the content called test inside it. Okay, so now that is what I'm trying to do it here. But the difference is I am not directly giving it as run, because if I directly give it as run, what will happen? Whatever that you have given for this run will get executed. But I have given this run itself on a on build. So on build will run only when you're creating the image out of this. So okay, now let me create a new image. Okay, so let's go to this container and let's create a container from this. Okay, now We have a new container. Okay. So now inside the TMP, do you see the file adam.txt? It is not present. That is because now you have specified to run this command only when you are building an image on top of this image. So this is already an image, right? So now let me come out of it. Okay. Now we have this container which was created using this image, right? So now how do I create another image using this image? So I can simply say docker commit, and we can specify the image name, right? Image 05, and I can give test image 06. Oh, I'm sorry. This is not the container name. So you remember in the previous class we saw that. So docker commit means with whatever content you have in a container, you are going to create a image, right? So now I created a new image based on this container. Okay, so that is an image from an image. So now let us go to this image and let's create a new container based on this. Okay, so I'm creating a new container but based on this test image. Oh no, I told you guys wrong. It is from here, not from here. Suppose if you want to create a new image, now instead of the from here, let me give this test image. Okay, and I don't want to do anything inside it. Okay, now let's create a Docker file. Okay, sorry for that. So on build will work only if you are creating an image on top of an image from the Docker file, not directly when you do a commit. Okay, so now did you notice this? In this Docker file, I specified only the from. So instead of using the template of Ubuntu, I am giving the image that we created sometime back using on build, right? So now for this, if I'm creating an image or if I'm building an image, see what happens. It is now running this command. Earlier, it was running the on build command, but it never executed this. But now, since you are building an image on top of this, what is that it has done? It has run this command exactly. That is, we are now creating an image called 07 from the image called 05. So that is when it gets created. So if you create a container now out of this image, you can see that. You see, the file is present. Getting the difference? Hello?
Yeah. So basically, it is like if you want to create an image out of an existing image, so that is where this command gets work. That is from the Docker file itself, right? Not in general.
Yes, exactly. So now, if you give anything in the on build, it will not run whatever that you have given after this on build. So it is just preparing the on build, but it never ran this command whatever you have given. That is why if you create a container out of this image, nothing was available. But for any new image that you're going to create based on this image, then you will be seeing this command getting executed, whatever you have given. So there's one more thing called maintainer. Okay, now this is not much of use, but generally it's like an author to specify who is the person who's creating the image. So in case if you want to stamp your container or image saying that this is the person that you have created, then you can just add a maintainer tag. It's just like a reference to a Docker information. So if you want to know the information of the image, right? So it will be telling that it has been created by this person with whatever details that you want to keep. But other than that, uh, these are used specifically for the open source images that you'll be downloading. But for production, you'll not be really using any maintainer because it'll be owned. But still, if you want to use, you can try. But it's just a way to tell who is the person who is creating the Docker file. So just for a reference, you will be